Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi here on this Friday night, and we have Tropical Storm Nate. And if you think back to yesterday on the satellite view, it looked very disorganized. The core was over the northeastern part of Nicaragua, and then moved over northeastern Honduras. And once it got back out into the open waters of the Northwest Caribbean, it started to organize, and it has been strengthening today. If you look at the structure here on the satellite, the core, while it remains open on the northeastern side, it is beginning to wrap around the circulation center. So it is getting itself stronger, and it's moving at a fairly decent clip here now, northwest at about 21 miles an hour. So it's going to pass very close to the northeastern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula sometime later this evening, and then out we go into the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. And this is where we are going to see it just take aim for the central Gulf Coast. And I'm thinking the landfall will be somewhere east of New Orleans and somewhere west of Mobile, Alabama. That to me looks like the prime target for this. And I think it will be a Category 1 hurricane. There's an outside chance that it will become a Category 2 before it moves on land. The hurricane tracking models all very tightly clustered. I'm going to see if I can make this a little bigger for you so we can see just how tightly clustered they are. You kind of lost me in the process, but oh, there I go. There we go. So you see how the models just have it all pretty tight. New Orleans is where that green line is. One of the models takes it there and then makes a sharp right turn, and almost a 90-degree turn, and that seems unlikely. Biloxi, Mobile, somewhere in there, and the models have actually been shifting a little bit to the east with every run since yesterday. So it'd be kind of funny if we wound up with a track back over the Florida Panhandle like the European had a few days ago. And notice, by the way, all the track models now actually have the center clearing the coastline of the northeast Yucatan and staying out over the open water. So that may actually give it a little extra boost in terms of the strengthening. All the conditions are, the upper air conditions are favorable right up until landfall. It's going to be just a question of time, because it's only going to have about 24 or so hours from the time it enters the Gulf of Mexico to the time it hits land, considering the speed of the speed that it's going at. And then notice after moving inland, makes a sharp, actually a gradual right turn up the west side of the Appalachians, and then crossing them across Pennsylvania through New Jersey. A lot of the tracks take it right over New Jersey and New York City, the remnant low. How much rain we're going to get out of this remains to be seen. I mean, I'm thinking on the order of, for my area, which is New Jersey, Long Island, New York City, Hudson Valley, Connecticut, eastern Pennsylvania, on the order of maybe an inch or two. I think the higher amounts are going to be north and west of the low track, almost pretty much how it happens when you get a winter type storm. So that to me seems the logical thing here. It's a little difficult because of the fact that the system is actually going to be losing upper air support. It's not going to get some extra added juice from the upper atmosphere. Now, what I've just put up here at the right now, these are the intensity. This is the intensity model guidance that the Hurricane Center looks at. Various models with all sorts of strengths being indicated. Now we have a few of those models bringing it up to minimal Category 1 hurricane status. A lot of them actually just keep it as a tropical storm all the way through until landfall. And one of the models not shown here that forecasts rapid intensification is actually still indicating that that is possible. So we're just going to have to watch the satellite and look at what the recon sends back in terms of information with regards to this to see if there'll be some rapid intensification. But let's say that that were the case, okay? 24 hours, 2 millibars an hour, it's at 996. So take 48 away from that would bring you down to 948. So that would be, if that were to happen, and I don't think it's going to, it's category, would be a category, probably a Cat 3 at that point at landfall. I don't think that's going to happen. But we could certainly go every bit of to maybe, high-end Cat 1, low-end Cat 2 before it moves inland. But I think that's probably the cap. If I saw at least a few models showing it up at the Cat 3, Cat 4 range, I might take a different view of this. Now, the other thing with regards to Nate is that the core is not that big. So you're going to have to probably be within about 50 miles either side of the center in order to experience the rougher weather that will come with this when it makes landfall. This is not going to be, one of these systems that's very, very large where gales go out 250 miles in all directions. So this is going to be much smaller than that. And we'll take you on the afternoon run of the GFS now and watch its view of all this. The GFS actually is, of all the models today, was probably the one that was the most aggressive in terms of the rainfall with regards to the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. And I bring that up because of the fact that it's been so bone dry. So this has been our one shot of soaking rain here in the last 5 weeks. But the other thing the GFS does is that it really doesn't strengthen it very much until it gets very close to the coast. And you can see the center passes east of New Orleans. Now look at the core of this. I'll go a little closer. And you can see the core is very tight. Look where the center is, and yet the back edge of the rain barely is to New Orleans. And I have to tell you, I went through in New Orleans when I worked there back in the mid-1980s. Hurricane Elena, if I remember correctly, came inland from the east into Lake Pontchartrain, which was one of the more dangerous scenarios that we could have there. And I had the eye pass within 15 miles of where my house. I mean, I was literally should have been inside the eye wall. I didn't have a wind stronger than 15 knots. I mean, that's just how tight it was. And of course, it was weakening at the time that it moved in. But it came in as supposedly as it approaches a Cat 2. It just fell apart almost on top of us. It was just amazing to be that close to the eye wall, and I could see it. And we had now hardly any weather from it. So, sometimes the characters of these storms, the characteristics of them, they're not all the same. Now, the GFS holds on to that remnant low longer than the other models, and that's why it has this very, rather large area of moderate to heavy rain that it brings through the Northeast Monday into Monday night, and then that goes out. As far as the weather down in the Gulf states, let me just go back here a little bit. And you can see, again, outside of the core, if you're not inside that core area, I don't think you're going to see all that much in terms of rain. In fact, when we put the rain map on here, you'll see the narrow stripe. That's the track. Look how narrow it is, the darker purples. That expands a little bit as it gets further northward, because that's the point where we're seeing it become post-tropical. And it does have an area of 2 to 3 inch rains from West Virginia into Pennsylvania, upstate New York, northern New Jersey to about New York City and southern Connecticut, just touching Long Island, and then lesser amounts as you go south. So in the area where you see that narrow purple, that's 4-inch plus rains. And notice that, by the way, that actually passes east of New Orleans on this run. So I'm thinking for you folks, if you're watching from New Orleans, if this tracks east of you, I don't think you're going to be too bad. I think you're going to have you'll have some weather, but it won't be anything crazy. And the main focus will be more toward Biloxi and possibly Mobile. Maybe Mobile is in the spot here where you might see the worst of this. But we have to remember that the structure of the hurricane, in terms of the geographic size here, is going to be very important. Now, let's go back. I will put the precip on. I want to actually, I want to actually look at the overall upper air pattern, because I know a lot of you have expressed the fact, both here and also on my Facebook page, that the heat's driving you crazy. And I don't blame you for that, believe me. Let me see if I can get this a little wider. I'm having trouble with the interact. There we go. Okay, so I want to take a look at the jet stream pattern going forward. Okay, we have a ridge off the Atlantic coast extending back to the Gulf states. You have a bit of a trough here in the east. This is the initial position here. That trough is swinging around, and the gradual lowering of the jet stream is just enough that it rides it up to the northeast. But notice you do have that upper ridge that builds off the southeast coast and back over Florida in the eastern Gulf. So the upper air feature that represents the tropical system actually loses support over time. And for those of you watching from the Canadian Maritimes, I don't think you're going to have a big problem with this, and it will probably wind up passing to your south as a post-tropical low. And I did have someone ask that. Let me explain. When tropical systems move up into the higher latitudes, they gradually lose their tropical characteristics, and they gradually become, instead of being a warm core system, which is strongest from the bottom up, they become cold core systems, which are strongest from the top down. And that's the transition process when it becomes extratropical. So once it makes that transition, it begins to behave much like any other low pressure system that goes by. So just the fact that it was a tropical storm, once it loses those tropical characteristics, it becomes something that is usually rather manageable. Every once in a while you get them to become these big extratropical storms like Sandy did when it made its transformation, and there are a number of others along the way, but for the most part they are not big troublemakers. Okay, so back to the upper air pattern. That ridge in the east is going to persist for a while through the latter part of next week. There's troughing again in the west, and that ridge, by the way, stays pretty strong across much of the southern half of the United States. It's kind of flat though. It's not pushed all the way up. So the upper air winds are running from California to Maine, and that's where the air in the northeast is going to be coming from, which means it'll be mild. It may not be super warm, but it will be mild, and certainly milder than normal. Cold air will be trapped in Canada. We go back. We're getting the new run now, so I'm going to go back a run here and show you, because they were kind of the same. Over time, that ridge in the east going into days 9 and 10 starts to finally flatten, and you'll notice that a flow does open up from northern Canada down through Hudson Bay, and then swinging across the Great Lakes. So that might be a shot of cool air that swings through, and then that lifts up, and then you've got a number of systems running around both in the northern stream and in the southern part of the jet stream. So, of course, after that, after you get past day 7, the variability becomes quite wide. So we start to lose confidence in what the models are forecasting. But overall, it certainly has been a very warm start to the month in the eastern part of the United States. I don't see that changing anytime soon. So let me bring myself up here full screen, and we can go get myself involved in the conversation, which up until now I have not been. So a big hello to everybody. If you've got any questions, just put them on there. Lady Box Rocks from Houston, you're fine. No issues for you with regards to this, and no, it's not going to come back your way, so don't worry about that. Rad Chick, afraid to enter the Gulf will do something unpredictable like strengthen, in a weird, the weird season that we've had. Well, again, the rapid intensification model says that it could certainly strengthen, but rapidly, but it's only got 24 hours to do it, because by this time tomorrow night it's going to be approaching the central Gulf Coast. So it's going to have a limited amount of time. Hello to Jaden's NASCAR fan from North Belmore, 99 Wolves, everybody that's on here. Didn't shift the Lily 13 Ella. I think unless my glasses are not reading that right, or is that, if that's Bella, Lily 13 Ilya. We did see a little bit of a shift to the east in the hurricane tracking models, just ever so slight. That certainly is enough that it'll probably be, I think New Orleans is going to be okay out of this. Raymond, you're going to get some rain from Nate. How much, I don't know, but I think the rain is going to be heavier north and west of the track of the remnant low. Oh my God, Lidl Griffin, you are so right. Yeah, the humidity is high, and it's going to be very high this weekend. I mean, we're really in a very tropical, almost Florida-like air mass here in the Northeast. Let's see. Cat 2 chances are low. Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're pushing the high end here for it to get to Cat 2. Again, not having enough time, and the upper air dynamics are not exactly, like certainly they're not the same as they were with Irma or with Maria or even with Jose. So I don't think it won't get beyond. Maybe it'll get to 85 miles an hour or 90 miles an hour on the top wind before landfall, but that might be the upper end of it at this point, in my view. Yeah, Awesome Gamer 123. I understand your worry for New Orleans. I lived in New Orleans. I still have a place there. I know, I know, not almost firsthand, but not quite. And I do still also have friends there, by the way. I do understand, after Katrina, they're always going to be on edge with these types of storms. If this tracks the way most of the models are showing, and by the way, the GFS has been the furthest west of a lot of the models. If it tracks the way the hurricane tracking models show, with the center passing to the east, there may not be that much weather to worry about on the west side. I mean, that's just the way it looks to me at this point. We'll reevaluate this, of course, overnight and tomorrow, but. If the storm is the characteristic of the storm is so tight and rather small in terms of the core, that unless they get inside that core, there just may not be any weather of real consequence. Yeah, there might be some gusty winds. Yes, there might be some heavy rains, but I don't think that it'll be anything that will be unmanageable. No, Devin Smith, I don't think, in terms of the speed of movement, no. I think it'll probably, it's going to move at this 20-mile-an-hour clip, maybe even a little bit faster once it gets up into the northern part of the Gulf of Mexico. So I don't think that part of the equation is going to change. So, all right, folks, we're going to leave it here, and I will be around tomorrow. So I'll do a live stream tomorrow morning. And we'll review what's going on with regards to Nate. Thankfully, there are no other tropical systems that are looking to develop within proximity of the United States that would be a problem. There's one way out in the Atlantic, but that's not going to bother anybody. What will Nate do to Boston? You may get some rain out of it, and once that goes by, it may get a little cooler later in the week, and the humidity level may drop off after all of this gets out of the way. We may have to wait for one more weather system to move on through here along about the Northeast about midweek, and right after that, I think we're going to see the humidity drop and the temperatures drop just a little bit. Right, and Bill Gooden, Cat 3 that kept Cat 5 storm surge characteristics was Katrina. Yeah, and it also didn't help that they had a levee system that wasn't built up to standard, and it popped. That's a political issue with regards to how things work in the great state of Louisiana. But hopefully they got those levees fixed now. For whenever, when the next time happens, and there will be a next time. I don't know if it'll be next year or the year after that, or maybe it won't be for another 2 or 3 decades, but eventually it will happen again. All right, folks, have a great Friday night. Make sure you go out and do something fun, okay? Because I can't. I'm still at work. So have a great evening, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.